Alright guys, hey, good to see you. Thank you for watching this video. As you can see, I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, Eric Elmore. And we're going to be discussing marriage, what it's not, what it is, and then just kind of briefly talk about marriage from our perspective. We're both relatively young. We've been married less than 10 years apiece. But you add those together, there's some wisdom there. Hopefully. But we just wanted to discuss a little bit about what marriage is. Eric had a great idea about, letting you guys, giving you some insight about what marriage is, because I know when I was in high school and when he was in high school, we didn't have a very good clue about what marriage was. So, with that being said, I wanted to talk about about what your views were in high school and talk a little bit about mine, and then we'll go kind of from there. So what were your views on marriage? I guess you'd say the high school Eric. How did high school Eric view marriage?
Right. So high school Eric did not have a sound biblical understanding of what marriage was. I would say that I hadn't really been taught a whole lot about it. There's probably some sermons that I sat in on what marriage was and things like that, but it just wasn't very important to me. I never really saw myself as like about to get married. You know what I mean? I always saw marriage as something, far off in the distance, so I don't have to worry about it right now. But looking back, I think that it would have been really helpful had I really taken it a lot more seriously back in high school, having a stronger foundation, really would have helped out a lot in my dating life, I think, having a stronger understanding of what marriage was. So to me, it was always this thing that I grew up in a home with, my parents have always been married my entire life. They never had any serious marital struggles even or anything like that. So I've had a good example before me. It's never been anything that I really was very curious about. And so I never really thought much about it, honestly.
Maybe till you got in high school. You got in college.
I got into college, absolutely. Once, I started dating in a more serious way, then I started to, think about things. Right. But I never even had a girlfriend in high school. So, I always thought, I'm way too young for this. I'm not even going to consider thinking about it, honestly. I think is probably my standpoint on it. So I wish I could say this was my stance, but I think I was just so apathetic to it, I didn't really even have anything to say about it, honestly.
Yeah, and so I'm sort of the total opposite, where I had multiple girlfriends, which was not good. I did not have a good model growing up. My parents hated each other for the most part, got divorced pretty young, when I was young, so to speak. And so marriage was something that I viewed as, you're not going to hem me in the corner. You're not going to ball me in. I wanted to be free. So I had a very wrong view of what marriage was, and even that affected my relationships that I did have. So let me ask you this question. How has your view of marriage changed since then?
Right. So obviously whenever I got into undergrad, into college, I met who is now my wife, Logan. So you just ended there. So I met Logan, and everything changed. Boom, done. Winner. Okay. So, whenever I asked my first girlfriend out, and when we started dating, obviously marriage became a thing that was immediately important to me now. So I started to formulate, what it is I believed about marriage, and I grew up in church, so. I've always been a monogamist. I've always believed that, sex is part of a marriage, and so it's something that should be contained inside of marriage. And it is one of the great, joys of marriage. It's one of the things that we get to enjoy in marriage.
So are you wondering what monogamous means? That's exactly what it means.
Right. No, I tried to explain afterwards. So I was like, well, it's okay. Yeah.
There's somebody watching me like, monogamous?
Yeah.
What's that? Mono one,
right?
Yeah.
Anyways, so so what was I talking about? What I believed about as how it changed. Because, and I also believe that as a Christian, that the purpose of dating, the end goal of dating ought to be marriage, right? So that was kind of another catalyst. Whenever I started dating my first girlfriend, that was one of the reasons why I started looking into what marriage was seriously, because that's the point of dating, right? So some of the things I think that changed whenever I started dating about my views on marriage. Marriage is not something that, I kind of looked at it as something that was this, life-altering, like earth-shattering, like huge, massive thing that took like a humongous amount of faith, I guess, to work through, and was just like this unbearable challenge, really. I always looked at it as something that was just like something that was huge. Like it would take like Hulk to take down this massive challenge, and while marriage is very important, and while it's a huge step in your life, it's a step that we can take. We may need help through Christ, we may need help from our partner, but
I don't know about, but I definitely need help through Christ.
But it's not an unsurmountable objective, I guess you could say, right? And that's kind of how I looked at it. I looked at it as this lofty goal that maybe one day, if I get like super awesome, super spiritual, maybe I'll be able to do it one day, but just not right now, Right. So I think that wall kind of broke down. I had to break down a little bit whenever I started dating my first girlfriend. It's kind of like you're in the pilot seat almost, like, all right, this is getting real. This is something that could happen, right. So I think that was one of the biggest switches in my mind that had to get flipped in order to start taking it seriously.
Yeah. So if we could go back and we could find Eric in high school, and we could corner him in the hall, what would you tell high school Eric about marriage?
Right. So I think there would be several different things. Probably
give me the top three.
Yeah, a couple super important ones. I think I would tell him that marriage is definitely something that that you can obtain. It's not a goal that's outside of your reach. Number two, it's gonna be something that you want to get after, like you're gonna want to be married one day, you might not want to be married right this second, but you're gonna want
trust me,
you're gonna want to be married one day. And I know that sounds a little weird saying to a 16-17-year-old, but you will. I mean, there's a solid chance. I mean, obviously there's a chance you don't want to get married one day, for a really small portion of people, but for the vast majority of people, you're going to want to get married one day. And so therefore it's something you're going to want to take seriously now. It's going to be something that you want to, especially going into college, because college is a completely different animal from high school. For the vast majority of you, you're not going to be right up underneath your mother's wing or your parents' wing anymore. You're going to have a little more freedom. You're going to be able to make your own decisions on more things. And sex / your dating relationship is going to be one of those things you're going to have a little more freedom with. So marriage is a thing that you really want to take seriously, and that's one of the things I would definitely tell 17, 18-year-old Eric. Another thing is I would tell him that just what a solid biblical understanding of what Christianity is. You want to go into that now? You want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah. So it's almost like, in high school you don't think about these things. I know I didn't, and I wish I could go back and sort of shake myself and be like, look, you need to start preparing for this now. Because you're preparing basically for your future spouse. You want to be pure. You want to be no regrets, and so that's one of the things that I struggle with even now. I've been married almost 8-9 years now. Let's see.
It's May.
8 years. 8 years in December, and that's one of my biggest regrets is, I never thought about the future, my future wife, and I just dated and, gave myself over and over and over. And then when it got time to marry, it's like, well, what do I have to give? I've given so much away. And so you don't want to make that mistake. You don't want to live with that regret, because it definitely carries over into your relationship. So girls, ladies, guys too, like, you need to understand, like, what you do now, you're preparing for marriage. And if you don't do a good job in preparing, you're setting yourself up for consequences, and you're setting up your future spouse for consequences. They're gonna be wondering in their mind, if they decided to remain holy, remain pure, they're gonna wonder in their mind, am I like so and so? They're gonna compare themselves to future your past relationships. So all of that.
Tell me about, man, I hate to ask this question, but tell me about that conversation you had with Megan.
That was hard.
It had to be.
It was hard. And what's even harder about that is living in a small county where we both were raised, and seeing ex-girlfriends, like, passing to the store, and I'd have to tell her, be like, hey, so-and-so, because it was almost like she didn't want to know, but she wanted to know, because she almost felt sort of like, the ex-girlfriend was like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. He probably didn't tell her about me. And I was honest with her. I'm like, look, so-and-so, and it relieved a burden off her, but it was also hard. And so conversations like that, before we got married, but
it is important to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
Obviously, she appreciates as well, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
The openness and honesty, yeah. And that's another thing that kind of surprised me about marriage, honestly, was how open you have to be. Not necessarily that I went into it thinking I'm going to be super guarded and everything like that, but just when you're single, you don't tend to think about all the things that you could say to someone else, So I think that one of the things that was a little surprising was just being open in communication is actually something that's not as easy as you might think.
No, it's not. Especially
extremely important.
With a personality like mine, where I tend to bottle things up. In some of my testimony, whenever I was younger, my mother left, and some of the backlash to that, I think, is I built up walls against women, like sort of a natural wall, and I never would let women inside past this wall. And when I got married, I realized that was there. Like, I wouldn't let Megan inside. I built this barrier, and we sort of navigated through this, and God kind of broke down that wall, and I realized that I like to keep things inside. I don't like to talk, and it was creating problems in our marriage. Yeah. I would say things and do things instead of addressing things how I was feeling. So that's a huge thing. But that's companionship. You look at the very beginning in Genesis 1:27, I believe, 1:26, God ordains marriage from the beginning. A man and a wife, they shall leave their parents and become one, right? This idea of unionship. And so that's what marriage is, in a sense. And so it's beautiful. It's hard, but it's beautiful, and it represents something more than just emotional and sensual feelings like sex. There's so much more. I look at Megan's grandparents. They've been married over 50 years, and just their relationship, you can see it's almost like they finish each other's sentences. And it's like they're so close. They've grown so close over the years. Like, that's the kind of marriage that I want to have. So let's talk about, briefly ending this, what marriage is and what marriage is not. So let's talk about what marriage is not. Number one, marriage is not dating. Okay? It in our culture now, we've replaced marriage with boyfriend and girlfriend. It's like, even in high school, like I was in a relationship like this where I dated someone. It was almost like we were married. I couldn't go anywhere without her approval. I couldn't do it. It was like this. It was like we lived together. I mean,
That's a key aspect of marriage.
Yeah, it was like what is going on? And so I think in our culture today, we've sort of jumped into this mindset. Okay, I'm dating this person. It's like we're married. That's not marriage. And let me just tell you, if you're living with somebody and you're dating them, that's not marriage either. Like, you're not married legally. You're not bound to them. All of these things. And so you can leave and have no legal ramifications. And what marriage we see in the Bible is a covenant before God and before others. And so a dating relationship, you haven't made those covenant, those covenant, what am I trying to say? Bonds in front of people, like those verbal bonds in front of people. You haven't done that. Marriage.
Do we need to talk about just briefly what a covenant is?
We'll get to what marriage is. Let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
The other point I want to make is marriage is not a trap. It's not something that you get into and it's like, oh, old ball and chain, and I finally did it. Here we. No, marriage is a joy. It's something to be celebrated. Think about it. When you go to a wedding,
that's what the reception all is.
And it's fun.
It's a party.
People are dancing. This is
not here, but
this is a time to celebrate. Sorry,
not in this building.
Not in this building. But it's a time to celebrate. Like, people pop champagne, and it's a good time.
Also not in this building.
Yeah, also not in this building. But you
could have fun without this.
Yeah,
things.
so you look at that, and you see that it's a celebration. Biblical times, it's a celebration. Jesus went to a wedding. He turned water into wine. It was a celebration, right? So marriage is not a trap. And marriage is not something that we have created. It's not something that mankind has said, let's create marriage. And you have these skeptics and these, conspiracy theorists. Well, marriage is just created by men and religion. No, marriage was created by God from the very beginning. Companionship was at the beginning when Adam was created. God saw that there wasn't a helper fit for Adam. So what did he do? He made one out of Adam and called it woman, and the two became one flesh from the very beginning. Marriage has its roots in the Creator.
Yeah.
So marriage is not those things, but
super quickly.
Yeah.
Also, I just wanted to point out that had marriage been left up to man to be created, it certainly wouldn't be as amazing as it is.
Right.
We definitely would have messed it up. The first thing I think of is things like anytime somebody creates a cult, like Joseph Smith and the Mormons. What's one of the first commandments they receive from God? I can sleep with all of these women. Like there's plenty of examples that we can point to and say, if man was left up to the creation of marriage, we would have messed it up.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The fact that marriage is as strong as it is today points to the fact that obviously we have Scripture to tell us explicitly, but also that too points to the fact that this comes from God, not from man.
And with that being said, here's another thing about our culture. God created marriage, but now the culture is trying to twist it and add and create. You see that a lot with gay marriage and all these rights, and people like God is the author of marriage, and He has ordained it to be between a man and a woman, and that is going to last forever. So regardless of what the culture says, the way that God has designed marriage is the only way that He views marriage. So I just want to say that up front. Now, so what is marriage, right? We can talk about what is marriage. Obviously, it's a beautiful picture of the gospel. It's a picture of the man and the woman humbling themselves, submitting themselves to one another as Christ submits to the church, so the husband should submit. Yeah,
and the idea that it is a picture of the gospel, I think, is why it's so important to hold on to the fact that marriage is only between a man and a woman.
Right.
Because if you start distorting what marriage looks like, then it's like you're playing with the image of what the gospel is. Right? So I think that's why it's so important. You often hear what you said before, but you don't tend to think about, the why. Why is that? Why is it so important that it has to be a man and a woman? And I think that it's because marriage is a picture of the gospel. Marriage is a picture of Christ and His church. And to kind of distort or change is that picture is like you're saying, the gospel that it is an image of isn't as important, or you have the power to change that,
Yeah.
So, sorry, just that.
No, and so a couple of places to look in Scripture, Ephesians chapter 5, go there and read. Paul gives explicit commands about husbands, how they should submit to their wives, which is complete opposite of the culture 100, 150 years ago where men were considered the dominant and you obey me. That is not the biblical picture. That is not the biblical picture of marriage. No. And so women, I could see how they're kind of abrasive to kind of get into a relationship like that because this male dominance. That's not it at all. In fact, a husband who is living according to the Bible will be one who is submitting to his family and serving them in humility. And that's a biblical picture. So Ephesians chapter 5, go there and read. There's other places that we can point to, but for the sake of time, we won't do that. Right. The last thing that I want to talk about what marriage is God's way of sanctifying us. And I can just tell you, I didn't realize how prideful I was until I got married. I thought I was a humble guy. I think about other people, right? And then I get married and I realize very quickly, oh my gosh, it's been all about me. Marriage has a way of stripping our self-relying tendencies to see just how prideful we really are. And so I've been married almost 8 years, and I can see over the years how God has used my wife to reveal in my own life areas where I'm falling short, mainly pride, areas where I'm selfish, areas where I'm not serving, I'm more concerned about my own wants and needs. And as you get older, you'll realize, oh my gosh, God is using my spouse. And so marriage is God's way of sanctifying us and to grow us closer to Him in godliness. And so I don't know if you've experienced that already.
100%. It's funny, the amount have changed that I've gone through, since being married. I'm a wholly different person than I was whenever I first got married. Even 2 years before I got married, right. Even that person is completely different. And I wish that I could say that I've only gotten better. Obviously, that can't be the case. But I know that having been just living with a person outside the context of biblical marriage makes you a different person. But add in the covenant that you have created with this other person and through God. It's absolutely a life altering thing.
Absolutely. Then you add a kid,
regardless of your personality.
Add a little kid in there.
That's got to be completely different.
You'll realize how prideful you are in that as well.
Through them,
So that's in a nutshell. It's marriage. Now I wish we can we have so much more things to say.
Just real quickly, what is a covenant? Just explain that real quick.
So covenant is something.
Don't want to glance over that.
Yeah, is a relationship where two parties kind of agree to this. Let me explain it this way. Mm-hmm. God makes a covenant with us. Now His covenant is different because it's mainly relies on Him.
It's unconditional.
It's unconditional. But a marriage covenant is one where the two parties come together and they make covenants. That's why you see people saying their vows at marriage. They say, I love you with all my heart. You have vows like that. Take this ring. And usually what a ring is, it signifies...
Use mine. Yeah. Wait, I can't take mine off.
The ring signifies the covenant. And so when you see a ring, it should remind you of the covenant that you've made.
It's a symbol.
It's a symbol of that. You've made a covenant to your wife, and you've made a covenant in front of God, in front of witnesses. And so that's why we have a ceremony, so that people can witness that.
It's like a promise.
Yeah, it's a promise. It's one that you make.
Vows. I'm vowing to do this, or say this, or believe.
And that's why Jesus makes it so strict in a sense that there is no option for divorce in marriage.
Yeah.
He does say, unfaithfulness, but other than that, and even in that, I would say reconciliation is to be sought. Right. But even, so there's no excuse, there's no reason. And when Jesus said that, He was speaking to Jews who would write off a divorce because their wife looked at them wrong.
For a reason,
and that doesn't picture what a covenant is. And so that's what a covenant is. It's life. It's lifelong.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, hey, I hope you're encouraged about what marriage is, and maybe that kind of alleviated some stress, some worry. If you're in high school, you're getting ready to go to college, I would encourage you to be thinking about marriage now. Don't wait until you get to a point where it's like, oh man, I might marry this girl. No, be thinking about how you want to date a girl in view of marriage. You want to be disciplined with your body. You want to protect your what am I going to say? Protect your innocence, so to speak, for your future spouse. Be thinking about that. Be praying now for your future spouse, and how you can serve and have that mindset when it comes time to marriage. And so maybe one day we can have another video about what biblical dating looks like. That would be kind of cool.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah. So any last thoughts you want to give them?
Yeah. I would say that this has been just the slightest scratch of the surface of what marriage truly is from a biblical perspective. So don't come away from this 10-minute video going,
you don't have everything figured out.
Yeah, I got it. Sweet.
We don't have everything figured out.
You know what I'm saying? So I would just encourage y'all to continue to search the scriptures, continue to search books. Maybe
Absolutely.
One of the 7 books you pick up in the next few weeks is going to be a marriage book.
Yeah, speaking of that, I hope you're doing this challenge, 7 books in 7 weeks.
It's a little intense.
It's intense, and honestly, it's just a personal challenge of mine that I'm inviting everyone to be a part of. And so I hope that you can do that. I have plenty of books if you need them. I even have little short books that pass as well. But yeah, that could be a book as well.
Standard. Yeah. So that's all I would say. It's just continue to seek out what marriage is, and just know that it is an extremely important thing for you to search out.
So a book that I'll plug in that I think is amazing, and that every single person and married person should read is The Meaning of Marriage by Timothy Keller. Phenomenal book. Incredible wisdom in that regards.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, hey, God bless you guys, and I hope your week is going well. And until next time, we will see you guys later.